there was this like work ethic and like I will outwork everyone vibe. And that was a big one. And I would also share there was a real emphasis on doing things right. And that maybe came from sports too, where it's like, all the little things matter, do all the little things right. Like, tuck your jersey in, like just all of it. Right. And so I was a real rule follower, I would say, and really afraid to make mistakes. And that just an immense sense of perfectionism that I think was modeled to me, but also explicitly coached to me through my parents, through coaches, through just trying to be the best at everything. And, it turns out that you can actually be quite quote unquote successful as defined by our cultural norms, but it's pretty miserable to live like that. And it often takes like a certain level of achievement through that to realize like this isn't working and this game is not really fun. And one, I really want to keep playing, and maybe I've been playing the wrong game the whole time. Keep asking yourself, what is it that you really want? And ask again and again and ask why. And my suspicion is that you will be doing want things that you want, or doing the things that you're doing in order to feel a certain way. And if that is true, ask yourself, is there a more direct way to approach that problem?
When your resume says made it, but your body says make it stop, what do you do? In this episode, Scott Britton, builder, teacher, and host of Evolution FM, opens the hood on a classic arc: achievement to unraveling to integration. We talk about the moment that the old metrics stopped working, the quieter intelligence that started to come online, and the practices that help you tell the difference between hustle and true creativity. Along the way, Scott shares why early plant medicine openings eventually gave way to an everyday, sober intimacy with a deeper self, and how simple, curious tracking of triggers can actually become a doorway to freedom. Then we get practical. Scott's new venture, Conscious Talent, is reimagining hiring and team building for people doing both excellent work on the outside and honest work on the inside. We dig into what it means to interview for energetic alignment without hand-waving away competence. Don't worry, no one's sacrificing external capacity. And the surprising signals that can point to real fit, like discernible intuition or the ability to take a fourth-person perspective. So if you're still in that crucible of living the dream but suffering at the same time, you'll hear some grounded first steps, a few lovable confessions, and a blueprint for bringing your consciousness into your work. Well, Scott, I just want to say it is so amazing to have you on. This is like a fangirl moment for me, because your podcast, Evolution FM, is one of my absolute faves. And I think that if any of our listeners are interested in explorations of consciousness, it is unmissable. Like, you really have the most amazing folks on. And I happen to live near the Omega Institute in New York. So I've had this thought. I was like, is there some way one day that it's like I could do something similar to you, but, taking advantage of all these people who are here. But I'm like, sometimes I just feel like I don't even need to, because like you really bring the best out of all of these like amazing thinkers and get them to share and open up. And yeah, just really inspiring to see what you're doing.
Well, thank you, Allie. That's so kind of you to say. And I just want to say, you're already doing it. Look at you. You're already there. You're doing it. And, I'm honored to be here with you and to connect with you and to just drop in and just hang out and get to know each other a little bit more.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. When I started listening to your podcast, I then was like, who is this guy? Like, what is his story? And I realized that there's a lot of themes that we have in common, from academic achievement to professional success in the startup world, to like having that actually be, I think, a moment for both of us where you're like, I'm at the top of my game. Everyone is telling me that, I'm living the dream, that, I've won, and I feel terrible. and
Oh
like,
yeah.
this is not working. I'm totally crumbling inside. So, I'm really excited to get into a bit of your career arc and the lessons that you figured out for yourself, that what you're starting to put down to share with others, because there are so many of us in this place going through this journey.
Yeah, you're so right. It's an immensely humbling experience to feel like I did everything right, and like I did everything that was supposed to equal happiness land, right? And
Mm-hmm.
just like not feeling how you want to feel.
Yeah.
And the humility that brings is immense and just very confusing, I would just say too.
Yeah.
I was very like, wait a second, like what has my whole life been?
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
know?
Yeah. And it all starts when you start asking yourself those questions and realizing that some of the answers that you had that you thought you'd figured out are actually like hollow, right? That there's
Hmm.
like nothing in it to sustain it. It's really disconcerting. And it's really like you just start questioning everything at that moment of like, okay, so what else is not true? I'd be curious. So for you, let's like step maybe all the way back, because I think some of these patterns that folks who are high achievers have, like these come from messages from childhood and growing up. What were some of the key messages that you had internalized about success and like quote unquote
Yeah.
making it?
Well, I was a very competitive athlete my whole life, really, until I finished college. And a lot of it was around like, you get in what you put out. Like, practice makes perfect,
Mm-hmm.
first one in, last one out, right? There was this like work ethic and like, I will outwork everyone
Mm-hmm.
vibe. And that was a big one. And I would also share there was a real emphasis on doing things right. And that maybe came from sports too, where it's like, all the little things matter, do all the little things right, like, tuck your jersey in, like just all of it, right? And so I was a real rule follower, I would
Mm.
say, and really afraid to make mistakes. And that just an immense sense of perfectionism that I think was modeled to me, but also explicitly coached to me
Hmm.
through my parents, through coaches, through just trying to be the best at everything. And, it turns out that you can actually be quite quote unquote successful as defined by our cultural norms, but it's pretty miserable to live like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it often takes like a certain level of achievement through that to realize like this isn't working and this game is not really fun. And one I really want to keep playing. And, maybe I've been playing the wrong game the whole time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that it takes a while, just speaking from my own experience, it feels like it can take a while to get to that point of like, oh, maybe I've been playing the wrong game, because I know that at least for myself, and I think, I want to get into your history of checking these boxes. It's like, oh, well then, if I'm not feeling great after winning this level, it's like, oh, I'll just go to the next level, right? So it's like, oh, I got into the amazing school and then I crushed it in terms of my grades there. And then I got, the most competitive job here. And then I started my own company. It's like we just keep
Right. Just
upping
whack-a-mole.
whack-a-mole, right? Upping the ante. So like, what did that look like for you? So when you came out of college, you went to Princeton, by the way. I believe it was probably like number one university at the time that you went. And then after you went there, like what did you do next? Where did you go from
Yeah.
there?
I mean, at the expense of sounding like a douche,
No, that's right.
I'll list the roster of accomplishments that I thought would make me feel good that didn't. So yeah, I went to Princeton, was the captain of the football team, was an all Ivy League football player, left college, got into tech, joined a rocket ship startup that had $100 million exit called Single Platform. I was kind of like the up and coming, hot shot there. And, was recognized in Business Insider as like 25 under 25, like was like getting awards. And then, I did the 4 hour work week thing where I read Tim Ferriss's book and started a passive income business, like basically teaching people things like courses before there were like everyone was doing a course, and moved to Brazil and was kind of like living that life. And had a very popular podcast actually before. That was like 2014. And then, what was going on for me was like, I really liked teaching people things and sharing information, but I felt like I was a poser. Like I felt like I hadn't really done enough yet. And I feel like I was like, all right, well, if I want to like inspire people and lead and all that, like I need to go to like start and sell a company. And so moved back to New York. I was also like lonely as shit, just like 25, like doing like digital nomad things. Like I just growing up on teams, like I just was more of that type of vibe. And moved back to New York, ended up partnering with a buddy of mine named Dan and starting this new venture that was a software business. And, similarly, like raised money from first round capital, like top investors, got to a Series B, made the Forbes 30 under 30 list, like living in West Village, like all the things. And, I just was kind of growing increasingly miserable despite all this. But I did have these stories like you described, where it was like, oh, well, I just haven't met my person yet. I was like, once I get that girlfriend that like I really love, like then my life will be set. Or like once we sell our company and I have like, some big financial outcome, like then I'm going to be set and then I can do whatever I want. And, like actually like my consciousness journey, like before I had found my person and had an exit with my company, like started before all that. And I think I just had reached a breaking point where I just was like, I'm not freaking happy and nothing's working. And I'm so easily agitated. And it was really an invitation to a ayahuasca journey that kind of was like inflection point one for me. So, and that was when I was 30 years old. So I'll pause there, but that should give a little bit of background.
Yeah. So do you think that at the time, could others around you sense your inner dissatisfaction, or do you feel like you did a good job of like putting on a happy face, but keeping this like starting sense of swirling, I don't know, dissatisfaction inside?
I think I was quite a good actor. Where like part of my patterns were around people pleasing and wanting everyone to like me. And so I was good at putting that face on. But I think like those people close to me knew that I was unhappy. Like I remember my mom saying to me, like, you used to laugh so much more like in high school. Like what happened to you? And just feeling like, hey, like that's not cool, mom. Like that makes me feel like shit. But also like, damn, she's right. When did I become such an intense person?
Yeah.
And I think there was like such a culture of optimization that I thought you could like optimize your way out of that, and I now see that for what it is, which is, just all kinds of strategies to avoid looking at massive wells of not enoughness and low self-esteem and, lots of the subconscious bedrock of like why people tend to be overly ambitious.
It's funny around the productivity and self-optimization. That's definitely a trap that I have felt into at times. And I see a lot of people out there. It's kind of, it's like you can look at your Whoop or at your Aura ring and be like, but it says I'm doing so well, right? It's like, oh, or if like I just got a little bit more sleep, that's the reason that I feel off. And it's not necessarily, these deeper questions that you avoid looking at those things because, oh no, it's not on the list of metrics or like the personal KPIs or OKRs that I'm tracking.
Well, I think it's a tricky thing about all this, right? Is there is no scoreboard for well-being and like your consciousness and like your subjective experience. And you can only see your own and you're the only person that can see it. So like our society rewards, how many followers you have and the high Whoop score and, how much you can bench and like how much money is in the bank and like all these things that are easy to measure. But like paradoxically, the thing that matters most, which is like, how does it feel to be you, is something that can't be measured. And as a result, we have a lot of people, I think that culture of measurement and optimization and really emphasis on what can be seen and measured has us approach our happiness in a very indirect way, which
Mm.
is working on the outside in, right? Trying to kind of, go to sleep 30 minutes earlier, or like lose 5 pounds, or like make $100,000 more a year, or whatever it is. And it's just a very indirect way to feel good all the time, in my experience.
Yeah. It also is like outsourcing our responsibility for our own lives. So, both when it comes to the external metrics of like, oh, if I just do this thing or if I just do that thing, like that's the equation for happiness versus really sitting down and thinking about what is it that I want to do with this one precious life? How do I want to show up to it? What are the values that I prioritize? What kind of person do I want to be? Like those are much harder questions, and no one can give you a manual for it. So I think that so many of us who are good at checking the boxes, who are good at the people pleasing, all of that, like we just don't do it.
Definitely not. And I would also say, like, even the answer to those questions, I think the way that we approach them is, often at a very shallow level. And so, like, I'm someone in my optimizer, overachiever man, history that was like, oh, okay, well, I just need to do the unique zone of genius tests. And I
Mm-hmm.
just need to do the like XYZ purpose finder tool, right? And you do all those things and you do all those reflections, and it's still operating from the intellect, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure out those things, which is can be useful, but it's also it has its limitations. And what I have found is that it's actually through this like gradual and layering process of the consciousness purification that these things start to just reveal themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And like what are you actually here to do? What do you value? What makes you feel alive? It's like there's so much programming and so many imprints that have clouded those things that you just can't really get to the core of my experience through intellect alone. You have to kind of go inward and start to do some real excavation and healing.
Yeah. And we'll get into your book in a little bit, because I think that one of the things that's wonderful about your book is actually the way that you identify practices that people can start to do to come to these answers themselves. But I want to go back a little bit to your storyline and go to maybe your ayahuasca retreat. So it's like you were feeling dissatisfied, feeling unhappy. How did the invitation to sit with plant medicine come to you?
Yeah, so I would share that like I'd never done any type of real drug in my life, or
Mm.
what I would call then a drink, But I guess I had like tried weed like a couple times, like throughout, college and high school, whatever. But it wasn't my thing, and definitely never tried anything else. So like ayahuasca was like, whoa, okay, like what's this? And a buddy of mine invited me to a retreat outside of New York, and I just was like in a vulnerable state, I was just like, fuck, like nothing seems to be working. I had talked to a lot of entrepreneurs who had said that it had a lasting change on their experience. And so I was like, all right, like, let's like, what do I have to lose?
Mm.
I'm kind of already at the bottom is what it feels like. And yeah, I mean, I can share the things that happened if that's interesting, but that's how the invitation kind of came on my plate.
Well, I'd be curious to hear, how did start to, it sounded like it was a transition point to you. So I'd be curious about like, how did it start to shift your perspective? Like what happened in that retreat that made you, start to see the world a different way?
Well, I think at a high level is my first altered state of consciousness. So it was my first experience that there was more to reality than just what I was seeing with my eyes and my thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And in that experience, there was a couple things that happened. One was it was the first time I connected to what I'd now call my true self. So it was like this, divine source of information in my awareness that was like different from my thoughts. It was distinctly different. And I felt like I could dialogue with it. And so I just started to ask like all the questions about my life. It was like, whoa, like, why am I here? Like, what are my parents? Like, what is this? Like, what is the purpose of all this? Like, I just had an incredibly rich information flooding into my awareness that was very different than my thoughts. And so that was very, very formative. One of the key messages from that experience was like, you've been here many times and you'll be here many times. You've been here like on Earth specifically many times and you'll be here many times again. And, that was a huge relief because I was like under this assumption that like, this is my one shot and I got to make the most of it, like kind of like life vibe. And so I was like, wow, what a relief. Okay. Like, so I've been here a lot and I guess I can, just have fun. Like, kind of treat this like a video game, I guess, where you just come back if you die.
Mhm.
And, the other thing is that I felt like I really connected with the kind of cosmic heart, like where I just felt this immense sense of love that was unlike anything that I'd ever experienced. And to this day, I don't know if I've still experienced anything quite like that. And, I just was like, holy shit, like, there's just so much more than I thought there was. And after that experience, I just found myself pulled to continue to investigate all of this. And I was like, this is like more interesting than like, the next million in ARR for my company. Like, this is more interesting than going to like XYZ bar. Like, and so I just, I swapped the Tim Ferriss podcast for like the spiritual ones. I swapped my business building books for Ram Dass. Like I just kind of like started to just go ham on all of this consciousness stuff. It was just like I had been set on fire like inside of me to explore all this.
Yeah. And I think the experience that you're describing in sitting with ayahuasca, with the plant medicine, I've sat with some medicines myself, and I had such a similar, it was such a relief, right? To see like, I've died a million times before, I'm going to die a million more times. And like, it's all okay. Even getting that message of like, you can start to view life with more sense of joy and ease and playfulness. Like that didn't seem possible to me. I thought that we were here to like work hard and the good things only come from the hard work and from the suffering and from all of that. And then maybe, maybe it comes from the puritanical work ethic or, I don't know exactly where it comes from, but it was such a reframe for me. I was like, oh, I didn't know that you could even
Seriously
do
I
it a
feel that.
different way. Yeah. So I'd be curious, like, how have you, because you continued, you were still at yours. So even after your plant medicine experience, right? Like you were still at Troops, right? That was the name of your startup. You returned to that world, and how did you still had to be there in
Yeah.
your job and in your company. So like, how did you show up to this maybe old world with a new mind?
Well, I think, there was a classic, like, everything's going to be different from now on, like I saw the light. And then like a month later, and that lasted for a couple weeks, right? I felt great. I felt like expanded and then like all the same shit started coming back, right? Like all the same easily agitation, like hypervigilance, crazy sense of urgency. And so I thought the answers were more plant medicine and meditating longer, right? So it was kind of like that, like more, harder, like applied to spirituality. And so, yeah, that's what I did. Like, it was like, I was doing breath work every day and I was meditating longer and reading more. And I did another plant medicine journey I probably spent a good year plus in this like need to do more harder thing and really wondering, right? Because if you take that mentality, you're like, where's this going to lead me? Like at some point it's like, well, maybe I should just go become a monk. Like maybe I should actually do this full time. And, I think us like intense type of people have that idea, right? Because it's like the obvious idea. It's like, all right, well, if my consciousness journey is actually the game I want to play and this is where it's at, like, there's a way to do this full time. There's a way to like really go for it. And something about that just like didn't fully feel right. And so I was very fortunate to meet a teacher through a coworker, ironically. And I don't even know if he knew that she was a spiritual teacher. And she reframed everything for me, and very quickly. And some of the big ideas that she conveyed to me very early in our relationship were like, your problems aren't outside of you. Like, your problems aren't like going to be solved by like the next achievement, the next whatever. It's a you thing, and it's an inner thing. And and I was bought into the idea at that point. And then the other thing was like, she basically was like, you don't need to like run away from your company or whatever to really evolve spiritually. Like,
Hmm.
you need to just start using this stuff for your growth instead of trying to control it and wield it to make you happy. You need to start using it as your teacher. And so that's what I did, because I was also like, well, I don't know if I want to be poor. And, it's like, I didn't frankly have the courage to just, because I cared so much about what people thought of me,
Mm.
I didn't have the courage to just bail on my career. That was too much for me. And so it helped both of those factors just kind of pushed me into this middle way of starting to learn how to recontextualize a growing portion of my experience as serving my spiritual evolution. And I'm very happy that it did.
Yeah. And what I love about your book that's coming out, Conscious Accomplishment, is to me, it's like part memoir, part spiritual tome. Like there's a lot of really rich spiritual teachings in there. But then it's also a bit of like this handbook with some practical practices and inquiry. So you'd shared a question that your teacher had asked you, which is, what am I resisting right now? As I was reading the book, I was like, oh man, this was it was really a potent question that kind of named an elephant that was in the room. So for me, I realized I'm like, I said that this chapter for me is about stepping into family and community and spirituality. And I just had a baby. And if I'm being real, like I'm resisting motherhood. I don't want to give myself over to this thing. I feel like it's getting in the way of my path. And in your book, you really talk about how whatever is in front of us, whether it's family or whether it's work, like this is what we have to work with.
Mhm.
This is the path. And it actually reminds me a lot of the Bhagavad Gita, where, if people don't know, this is a very famous, ancient, formative Hindu text. And in it, Krishna says to Arjuna that basically, our duty, what it's all about is to do the thing that is in front of us, to share our gifts with the world, but to do it through it's not through out there. It's not through running away from the present moment. It's about really diving into it and being with whatever's in front of us. And I think that that's interesting because in my journey with, recovering from burnout and overachievement and all of that, I've had this thought like, oh, well, I need to run away from, I had a temptation to be like, oh, well, work and achievement and making things happen, that's the problem. That's what I have to solve. So now I need to move all the way in this other direction. And for sure, I need to let more joy and ease and intuition and unfolding happen in my life. But running away isn't the answer, and work can actually be a path. So I would just be curious, like first off, like how do you define conscious accomplishment, and like what is this new paradigm that people can take into account as they think about work and the role it plays in their lives?
Yeah, I think so. Just to kind of set the stage here, like I think to really buy into conscious accomplishment or even be prepared to approach it, there has to be a belief that, okay, like I need to start to work on myself and my joy and my understanding, like internally. And that paradox shows up that you just described, where you look at all of your things that you've done with like the achievement and the making shit happen and all this stuff in the quote unquote like accomplishment world. And you're like, well, shit, that's not the inner work, right? Or that's not letting go, or that's not surrender, right? It's the opposite of those things. And the idea with conscious accomplishment is that you actually can use the movement towards things as a way to see yourself more clearly and to support the evolution of your consciousness journey. And so like, it's not, I'm going to expand my consciousness by going to become a monk and run away from all my achievement. It's actually, I'm going to place a priority on my relationship with everything that happens in the pursuit of creating the life that I want and pursuing the things that I want as the primary means to my growth. And the key practice here that's related to that kind of just grounds this idea is that my teacher basically was like, you already, like, your not natural essence, like that true self that you encountered and that you want to get back to, right? And like want to be with all the time, like it's already infinitely loving, infinitely okay. Like it doesn't need to like change all these things, right? But you have these patterns in your perception, in your consciousness that are covering that up and that are taking you out of peace. And so what you need to do is start to use every single time you get disturbed by anything that's happening in your life as a way to go into your subconscious and to see, like, what are those patterns? What are those suppressed things? What are those things that happen to you that you need to purify and heal so that space can be created for that natural essence that you experience to increasingly emerge? And so what I started to do was write down every single time I was triggered. I would just start to like notice it. And I would like, it became this little game where I was like my coworker pissed me off. Like I'm running late and I'm freaking out. Like the coffee line's moving slow. Oh, my mom's up my ass about something, like, and it was like, holy shit. Like I realized like, my life is a trigger fest. And I thought that was normal. And it turns out it might be normal, but it's not natural. It's not aligned with our natural state, that divine essence. And B, this territory that I was in as an entrepreneur was actually like so rich and fertile in terms of helping me see all the things that were obstructing my true nature. And so that was the big reframe. And so like, you kind of have to like understand that to like broach a conscious accomplishment where it's like, oh, okay, my path isn't me returning to my divine essence and evolving my understanding and awareness. It's not just about meditating 2 hours and 3 hours and 4 hours and 5 hours and 6 hours, right? And some people choose to do that, and that's great. But it's actually just living my life and going after the things that I think I want, and then using all the opportunities that come my way.
Mm.
And that's what I started doing. And it was just like, what was so amazing about it was like, I think one thing that people really love on the consciousness journey and the inner work journey is revelation, is the understanding of, why am I the way that I am? Why does my life look like this? And what was so cool was by starting to like use these moments of disturbance as a cue to go inwards, every day became a retreat. I was in a constant state of understanding more of myself and revelation. And I still am, and I still live like that. And I would argue even that complexity of that type of life might help me see more of myself than if I had just hung out in an ashram, all day. And so, yeah, I think with conscious accomplishment, this paradigm, it's like, it's trying to do a few things, but one of the main things is to just show people like, you don't need to drop out of life to have rapid and continuous spiritual evolution and self-understanding. In fact, you're probably perfectly positioned where you are to begin to do that.
And that's so empowering, because I think that, a lot of people, when they start asking these questions, to your point, they feel like they need to run away from their lives. They need to go into I totally had a moment in college where I was very stressed and depressed, and I was like, I'm just going to go join a monastery or something. And the reality is that it's running away from your problems. Or for any of us who've been on meditation retreats, it's like after you get past the first few days hump, we're often in peace and bliss and stillness. And then you come out of retreat, and especially if you don't have your phone, right? You start getting the messages, and it's like, this thing blew up at work, or, your spouse is like, wait, what's for dinner? Or the kids need this or that.
Right.
And you could be like, everyone shut up, get out of my bliss, like get out of here. So, I love that you're reframing that, like, we can use all of these as material to work with, as opportunities to understand ourselves. And, this practice that you're talking about, writing down your triggers, like it's got freedom log. Can you tell us a little bit about like exactly what that looks like? So it's like, is it at the end of the day or after something happens? And like, what do people write down?
I'll pull out my freedom log right now.
All right. Yeah. So
which I still use. Right. And so like, I'm looking at my note, and like, basically it's just an iPhone note that I have on my thing. And I would say like the practice has evolved, and there's like a continuum of noticing that you can begin to work with. But It's really just, I'm trying to identify moments that are unlike my true nature at the highest level, which is like infinitely loving, open to life, and at ease. And yeah, I'm looking at this, and yesterday I noticed I judged someone on social media. I didn't like say anything to them, but like there was this like, oh, look at this person posturing, right? Like look at this like person playing social media games that are so dumb, right? I had a conversation with, I was just sharing with you, I recently had a Lyme disease diagnosis, and someone was telling me about how you can't recover from it ever fully, and like all of these things, and just projecting their experience on me. And I had a real sense of like hopelessness come up, and like feeling damaged. And so I write down like feeling damaged by line, like social media judgment. I noticed myself this morning, there was a podcast that I had tried to get on for this book release, and the person kind of like was like, oh yeah, my team will look into it. And the person I'd asked for this intro to was like, you should have more people like lob in, like you should invite this person, and like maybe that'll help. And I was like, oh yeah, I could ask so and so. And then I just noticed there was all this hesitation that came up
Hmm.
around like, whoa, okay, like, I noticed just the hesitation around doing that. And so like all of these things, whether it's the feeling of being damaged, the judging of somebody on social media, the hesitation around asking for help, they're all cues for me that are reflecting back. My relationship with the outside world is reflecting back to me parts of my consciousness, parts of the information and energy in my subconscious that are determining how I see and experience the world. And so, I write these things down and I go into them, and I try to go into as many as I can. I'm not perfect, but I have a practice in the morning where I like look at the things from the day before on my list that I like haven't done, and I'll just go into them. And I will also just like in the middle of the day, if I have time, oh, okay, like I had 20 minutes, like I'm like, oh, I'm going to go into this, and I'll just kind of do those intermediate sessions. And sometimes I'll also just kind of like work on this stuff, like on the fly. And to show you an example, to like kind of paint the picture here of like, okay, so there was that hesitation experience around asking for help. I went into that, and I, eventually got to this place of like, the words were like, you haven't done enough yet. And I was like, where is the first time that I felt like I haven't done enough yet? Right. And I was taken back to all these memories throughout my life of like different things that happened to me, and was able to kind of get to a root imprinting experience of me being a kid and basically feeling like I hadn't done enough to get a girl like me. And so like that experience of like being in fourth grade and that happening was continuing to play on repeat in how I relate to reality. And we can talk about like, what is reality, but like, not only was I experiencing that, but reality was continuing to give me opportunities to face that and to
Yeah.
heal that. And so it's kind of like when you recognize this dynamic, it just becomes like the intelligent thing to do to start to work on this stuff, because it's like, all right, like I want to be able to ask for help freely. And like, I don't want this thing that happened to me in fourth grade continuing to like run the show here. And so, that's the freedom log, is really that place that you can just capture these experiences of being disturbed or noticing things that are unlike your true nature, and then start to use them, start to go into them and see more of yourself, see more of your consciousness that's creating your experience.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like such a potent tool to start to uncover some of these deep-seated beliefs or scripts that might actually be running our lives. And then to reframe, because then sometimes those scripts, right, to your point, the universe keeps giving us opportunities to work on it. But if we are not conscientious about this, we can be like, God, why is the world like this? Like, why does this thing keep happening to me? Instead of realizing, oh, it's happening for me because this is another opportunity for me to face this pattern that, maybe whatever coping strategy I came up with, it worked and it made sense for fourth grade you to the best of your abilities at that time. Here you are, I don't know, 25, 30 years later, and we're still using, elementary school strategies to try to
Totally.
navigate and solve our lives.
Yeah, it's a crazy thing, right? And I think it's part of the human experience. And I mean, to me, this is it just is a fundamental paradigm shift, right? Of how you relate to working on your life when you start to embrace things this way, because it's like, I can keep going around the merry-go-round of trying to fix my problems by doing more, doing better externally. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't do external stuff. Like, it's a both and, right? It's like, you continue to you apply effort towards whatever it is that you want in your life, but you recognize there is these fundamental mechanics of reality that are going to keep bringing shit up in your life until you solve the core in your consciousness. And the universe, you're right, it does that. It's a benevolent design. It loves you so much that it wants you to discover these things about yourself. And so it organizes the circumstances so that you can do that. And until you get on the consciousness path, you're kind of blind to this whole thing, right? And reality just feels like a soup of randomness. But as you start to use everyday life as a way to see yourself more clearly, there starts to be this coherence, right? Of like, here's something that happened in the outer world. I went into it. I learned this thing about myself. I shifted it. And then my outer world shifted, right? And then you do that again and again and again and again. And then you realize like, oh my God, like all the like ancient, like as within, so without, and like all these ideas right around like you creating reality. I get it. Like it's not the thoughts that I have where I think about all the things I want and I create my reality. It's the totality of my consciousness creating my reality, which includes all the subconscious things that were thrust upon me when I was a kid that have been obscured from my awareness in order to protect myself. And this is just what the human, this is what being a human is, and you get to go on this rich excavation once you start to realize like just some of the mechanics here that are part of life.
Yeah. And not resisting them. It's like there's this idea of like Earth School, right? That's
Yeah.
out there, and remembering like, okay, we chose this. This isn't something like, yes, we are experiencing it and we are going through it, but like we chose to have these experiences. And then to the extent that we can, I try to remind myself of this all the time, that it's like life is a game and there are various games within it. And can I approach whatever is in front of me with that sense of playfulness and experimentation and curiosity of just being like, oh, well, I wonder what'll happen if I try this out, and really using, that childlike beginner's mind and bringing it to the situation, and not bringing like the childlike solutions that I came to the problems, but the childlike wonder instead.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, I think the experimentation mindset is like essential for this journey, right? Because, you're going to read a lot of things that don't make sense. You're going to read a lot of stuff that thinks it's like bullshit, but it's ultimately a direct experience that is going to shift you. And the only way you'll have a direct experience is if you try things, right? Somebody told me, hey, Scott, you have this like inner voice thing, and it's like your true essence, and it's an eternal soul that is like infinite. Like, I'd be like, okay. But then I experienced it in that ayahuasca experience. And so I was like, all right, cool. What else is there? And I think, that openness, right? And to let your own experience be the arbiter of your truth is a very essential thing of this journey, and learning to get comfortable with that. And if you're not comfortable with that, that's a great thing to put on your freedom log and go into,
Yeah.
right? And understand why.
Yeah.
Why does
Get
that feel so
curious
risky?
about it.
That's right.
So, we talk about these, and really a lot of the practices in your book as tools to help us reconnect with our higher selves, embody or navigate life from that perspective. For you, ayahuasca was something that helped you get a taste of that. For me, plant medicine also helped me with that journey. Do you think people have to do plant medicine to taste their higher selves? Or are there other ways that people can get glimpses of that place?
Definitely not. I think it's a potent accelerant for some people. But man, I mean, I talked to a guy yesterday who had an NDE. I talked, a near-death experience. Other people I know have a major tragedy in their life is kind of what helped them start to connect with something deeper. And obviously, all the various spiritual traditions, or many of them at least, don't really talk a whole lot about plant medicine, right? And there's meditative pathways and just all kinds of different ways that people can get in touch with that essence. I do think for at least Western culture, which is like so heady, so in their head, it can be really powerful just because it gives people just like a window into out of that. And I don't know if that's true for all cultures,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, Native Americans, it's like they just kind of grew up knowing this stuff. Like this was in their culture, right? We kind of haven't really had the narrative that promotes that. So it's harder to discover, but I definitely don't think it's required. And honestly, like plant medicine, like I had some good experiences, but I've also had some really tough ones and really destabilizing things. And it,
Mm.
that doesn't get talked about enough, is like, can be a bit of a dice roll.
Yeah. So are there any like specific practices or things that you would recommend to people? Let's imagine someone is saying like, okay, I'm curious about connecting, but I don't exactly know how to get there. Is there any like first
Yeah.
step or
Great
something you would
question. Great
recommend?
question. So there's a lot of practices out there that people can try and research, and, people will tell you all different ways. I found that I was actually through the process of like facing my triggers that I started to become in regular contact with my higher self. And so it was through the transformation process itself that I actually started to make contact with this deeper essence. And I think that the high level structure of that is like, I'd have this like trigger, whatever come up. I'd get into a calm state. I'd drop into my body. I would try to basically like identify it's accept, face, replace is
Mhm.
like what like a thing that my teacher would tell me. And it's basically like, okay, like use my intention to like bring back that experience and like be in my body, and then like accept like whatever comes up. And a lot of times there'll be like all kinds of thoughts and emotions and just like crap coming into my awareness, and I'm facing it and I'm accepting that it's all there, knowing that it's not me, knowing that I'm the observer of that.
Mm.
And then at a certain point, for me, what started to happen was I noticed that there was information, like positive, loving information that was coming up, that was like, you're loved, like we're like that. And like that feeling. Right. And I'm like, whoa, like, what's this? Like, and eventually I started to recognize like that was actually that deeper essence that I had made contact with. And as the more and more I started to do the healing work and the purification of a lot of this like stuff that I didn't know that was in my consciousness, the more accessible and consistent that connection became.
Mm.
And so, and I didn't touch plant medicine for many years after those early experiences, and was hanging out with my higher self every day. So I'd say a lot. And I know like people who do like IFS, like internal family systems, like that's another way you can kind of start to get in contact with like a deeper essence. And so like, I think that's really the transformation work. If you just keep doing it, it'll just become available to you.
Yeah. So it's like just start with the freedom log
Yeah,
and maybe identifying the things that don't feel good, that you already know don't feel good through your triggers. And then over time, with enough inquiry and getting curious about them, you might start tapping into like what's behind that, right? Like if you
yep,
know that this thing doesn't feel good, that something is out of alignment, then you can sort of like have the mirror face each other of like, okay, well, what is the alignment that is noticing what's out of alignment?
totally. There's always something behind it, There's always something driving these experiences. Yeah, getting curious is, I think, the right posture.
Mm. So on top of you're doing so much right now. You've got your podcast, you've got
I am doing a lot. It's
Substack.
maybe too much.
You have got a whole lot on your plate because you're also stepping into a new mode of company building with your new firm, Conscious Talent. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. So I think, what we've been talking about are like fundamental shifts in worldview about how does life work and what is the purpose of it? And like, how should I relate to all these things? And when you get on this journey, I don't know about you, but I found myself increasingly wanting to be around people that saw the world the same as me, or in a similar way. Not, it doesn't have to be the same, but like more similar than not. It's like, I thought about myself as like, I need to get more money and then I'll be a happy person. And now, where I'm at today is very different. Like, it's just harder for me to relate and to want to be excited about creating something with those people, my old self.
Mm.
And so conscious talent is essentially trying to make it easy for entrepreneurs and leaders to connect with other leaders, talented operators who are both really good at what they do, but are also on this inner work journey and exploration. And so I think you can think of us right now as a recruiting firm. We have much bigger ambitions than that. But to start, it's like we're just trying to connect people who are holding both worlds and start to have them create and build things together. And, I think it's like what I've observed is, and there's a lot of reasons why I'm excited about that. Like one of them is like, I think it starts to become possible to start to embed this stuff into how people work, right? Like where it's like today our culture is like, all right, you have your little therapist or you have your little practice and then you go do work mode and then you come back and, it's just completely compartmentalized. And I don't really think compartmentalization is really a good thing or with this. I mean, if we really are here for the evolution of our consciousness, shouldn't that be like the most core thing into the places that we spend the most time? And yet it's not because of our culture. And so I think like the shape and way that companies operate can evolve and be different when they have this kind of DNA of the existing teammates. And I also think the way that things are created can evolve too. There's just certain shifts in perspective around like how and why things get done that are different when you're on this journey. And so we're excited to just like start to help people build teams that can unlock these things and hopefully shift the culture that we're in around the integration of consciousness into work and careers.
Yeah, it almost feels like, there's a lot of people in the consciousness world that are talking about there's a shift that we're going through right now in the collective. And it feels a little bit like what you're like conscious talent. It's almost like picks and shovels for getting to that new world. Because even, I don't know, maybe from like a less mystical or more traditional spiritual perspective in Shambhala Buddhism, there's this idea of creating an enlightened society. And in the enlightened society, it's like we need enlightened police officers and lawyers and construction workers and chief technology officers, right? Like we need all of these pieces, but the organizations have to, before we get there, it's like the organizations have to choose to create from that place and to value those behaviors and attitudes, right? Because they say, it's like it's the best and the worst of the CEO that defines a culture of an organization. And it's really inspiring for me to think about, a CEO or a leadership team being comprised of people who, I'm not saying that everyone's necessarily enlightened, but they're on their path and they're doing their best. And, they share these core values that are not things that like you paint on your wall, but are things that like you really carry in your heart.
I agree. I mean, even something as simple as like when some shit happens, right? Something doesn't go well, there's a conflict or there's a whatever it is, even the tendency of the organization and the people sitting around the leadership table to look inward first, that can fundamentally transform a company and in the experience for everybody that works there. And so and that's just like one little thing that's part of the conscious journey, right? And so I think I hope we have enlightened societies, right? And I think again, I think the way that we get there isn't everyone becoming monks, right? It's really us starting to integrate this stuff into the fabric of what we're already doing. And, I think we're going to just see more and more companies doing that. And hopefully not just talent, hopefully this book, this theme of integration is why I'm here. Like this is the mission that I have. Everything that I'm doing is to support it. And so, like we need to start doing it. We need to start doing it. We need to start putting points up on the board for these companies, right? And showing that like, hey, companies that do this actually can still be highly effective. Because I think that's a whole question mark that we have as a society. And I mean, I don't know that I have a zillion proof points, but like I definitely have my own and I have people I know. And I think, to normalize this stuff, we just have to show that companies that do this stuff actually have positive outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that in your book, you say something that like as awareness grows, effectiveness actually increases within a company, and the company can be bigger and better and stronger. Because I think often when people think about bringing awareness or bringing morals or value, all of a sudden they're like, oh, this is going to be navel gazing, or all of a sudden,
Right.
we're making decisions by consensus and nothing's ever going to get done. And we're just giving hugs to each other all the time and not really doing the work. But it sounds like you've seen some examples, maybe both companies that you're working with or other companies that are out there that are showing that a different way is possible.
Yeah. I mean, let's just like take a couple of these things you just named, right? And so first off, I think of like, it's really important to get clear on like what is awareness. And the way that I think about awareness is it's not how touchy feely you are, right? It's not how emotional you are. It's the capacity to see reality as it is. And if we live in a reality that has fundamental properties and laws about how it works, right? With an example being like, whoa, okay, I'm going to keep having the same thing happen to me over and over again until I become aware of it. That would be like an example law, if you will.
Hmm.
Your ability to see these parts of yourself, the truth that it's there, and the ability to see the structure that you're operating within means that you can align your activities and your actions to that understanding. And so that is the core essence of why awareness creates effectiveness. And a lot of these like cultural things we have, like navel gazing, right? Like, don't get me wrong. I'm sure there's something useful that can come out of that, but it doesn't necessarily map one-to-one to awareness. And it's kind of more like a spiritual culture,
Mm.
spiritual practice, right? And I would say, on things like, well, we have to have consensus. That's interesting. What's behind that? And I imagine the answer is going to be different, but like maybe for some people, there's a concept that being nice means being being a conscious person.
Hmm.
Or maybe there's a fear of confrontation. Or it's maybe I won't look spiritual if I, put a line in the ground and say we're doing this. And so like even these things are opportunities for us to see a greater portion of truth. I just think it's a never-ending journey, right? And that's the beauty of it, and that's the exciting thing. I think what we haven't have, we frankly just don't have a lot of people that are operating there's not a ton of examples that I can easily point to of people that are operating at a very high level of effectiveness and also a very, very high and committed level of consciousness.
Mm.
And that doesn't mean they don't exist, but it's just if you walk up on the street and you ask somebody who's doing that, it's not like there's a zillion examples. And so we just need to start to understand these things ourselves culturally through our own experimentation, share those ideas and lessons, and share the examples, right? So we can start to kind of learn collectively new modes of being and creating and working together.
Yeah. And I think that part of the reason too that we might not even, see or have a lot of examples that come to mind easily is I feel like people who are maybe doing this are doing it in more of like a quiet, humble leader. It's like it's just what they do. Maybe it's something that doesn't even seem very special to them, but feels like magnetizing to the people that they work with. Yeah, like I can think of coworkers where you're like, oh no, like they were just holding their seat in the midst of like some crazy stuff that was going on, or they were treating people with respect, or they were super clear about what was possible and what was not possible. I think that maybe when we put it in that way, we can all start to bring people to mind who are embodying that energy, but who maybe weren't like really flashy about the
Yeah.
whole thing. But I think that we need to start, highlighting those people to the extent that we can. And I feel like, that's again a place where conscious talent can come in. At least it's a place where like companies can start to, broadcast the intention in a way to start to show up that way and to say like, see how it is interviewing with our leaders or see how it is being part of this team because we are trying to do it a different way.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think, ultimately it's just more and more examples more and more examples, more and more people talking about this is what's going to change the way we work, change the way we do things.
Yeah. So I'd be curious, just in the conversations that you've had so far with candidates or with companies, like what does it look like to interview for more of this, I don't know, energetic, spiritual, philosophical alignment versus more traditional metrics of fit?
Well, it's very it's let me say it's very bespoke, right? Like every opportunity, every founder we work with is very different, and they have a different set of criteria that they care about for someone's inner world, right? An interior commitment. And so what I would say though is that in zero cases has anybody sacrificed the external capacity as a key factor, right? I think like, there's this idea that it's like, oh, I've done all this spiritual work, right? And so like I'm a good fit for this opportunity. And it's like, people still want stuff, people still want people to be able to get shit done.
Yeah.
Like that's, in business, like that's kind of the game that we're in. And what is clear though, there's just like there's a higher bar being set. There's an added dimension and an added component. And so, when we work with a company, we'll just ask them like, when it comes to inner work, like, what does that mean to you? And like, how does that show up? And what do you want to make sure that this person has in order to be successful and help you create your vision and the type of company that you want to create? And everybody's going to be different. And I can share some examples, like, for one founder that we're working with, like it is all about resonance. Like it's all about, they're building a product related to resonance, but it's all about, their understanding of like energy and like being attuned to that. And it's almost like someone needs to be highly intuitive. Like that's just, there's really no other way to say it. Another person we're working with wanted their person to have like what I would call like fourth person perspective, where like they can objectively look at like their scenario and see like multiple perspectives and not like be like strongly identified with their view, recognizing that it is likely a view that was just thrust upon them by like their experience and their conditioning. So it totally varies. And our job at the end of the day is like to place people, to like introduce companies to these people that align to that. But each company has to do their own vetting of like depth, right? Of like, okay, like, we're not the judge of someone's consciousness is my point. Like each company has to kind of go and do their fact finding on the people that we put in front of them to really understand at a very thorough level whether they're actually showing up in the way that they're asking.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I used to run people team at my last startup, so I'm just sort of imagining what it would be like interviewing for that, or like how do you develop a case study to test for some of these things. But I think it's just a really cool dimension. A lot of people say it's like, oh, I don't want to work with jerks. I want to work with good people.
What a low bar.
Yeah. It's like, oh, what
no
about people who inspire
rule.
me? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, cool. That's your aspiration is no assholes. Wow. We gotta pick that up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's like, I don't know, coming from the law, especially, I'm like, oh, no jerks. That sounds great.
Yeah, I know.
We'll
It's the
jump into
the
that.
bar is low. The bar is low. It's crazy.
Well, Scott, just as we start to wrap up, a couple rapid fire questions for you.
Nice. Love this.
What is a go-to practice that you do to just bring yourself back to center?
Just dropping into my body, just opening to like whatever the sensations are present, closing my eyes, doing that. And I would say, there's this concept of like open heart qualities in the tradition I've spent the most time studying, and you can put your attention on anything and feel it. Like we have the ability to direct the spotlight of awareness onto like what we want to experience. And so certain emotions like trust really is a big one, like a feeling of like true trust that like I'm cared for and I'm safe. That's a big anchoring point for me.
All right. What's the latest teacher or book that blew your mind? You're always talking to people like every week, but I'd be curious, who's the latest and greatest?
There's this podcast I'm listening to like today, like of this guy, Alessandro Giannetti, talking about divine law and like the laws that operate in this reality. And it's really good. And so like I'm very curious about him. And he seems like a pretty interesting person. And yeah, I'm really excited to just continue to explore him.
Very cool. All right. Let's imagine that there's no more internet. I don't know if there's been like a CME or something. Something's happened, and you have so much writing and podcasts and things that are out there. What is one message that you would like someone who's trying to move from like running on ambition to stepping into purpose? Like, what is the one message that you would want them to hear?
I would say keep asking yourself, what is it that you really want? And ask again and again and ask why. And my suspicion is that you will be doing want things that you want or doing the things that you're doing in order to feel a certain way. And if that is true, ask yourself, is there a more direct way to approach that problem?
That is a powerful, powerful one, especially for those of us who've checked all the boxes. And yeah, even though we know that the last box check wasn't the thing that made us feel great, we can still somehow think that the next one will be what gets us there. So I
No,
love
yeah.
this idea of like, well, what's the real problem that I'm trying to solve? And like, how can I actually get to that place instead? So Scott, this has been amazing. Thank you so much. If people want to follow along with your work, where can they find you?
Well, thank you, Allie. It's been a real pleasure. You're a joy to talk to. I would say, yeah, the book, Conscious Accomplishment, it should be on Amazon. Check that out. Has a lot of the things more on a lot of what we talked about. Thanks for the mention of the podcast, Evolution FM. You can find that wherever you get podcasts. And then been writing on Substack more. And so you can just search my name and just find my Substack. And that's been a lot of fun. So lots of internet surface area that you can find me if you feel called to it.
Yeah, I love that. It's like whether you like to read, you got video, audio, whatever you want, Scott's got you.
There we go.
All right. Thank you so much, Scott.
Thank you.